Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name's PF, and on today's episode we're going to be covering another Game of Thrones whiskey. Now this is the fourth one that I've covered in the Game of Thrones whiskey range, and it is going to be the last one. I've picked up the four that I thought that I would like. Obviously it's an expensive endeavour to go out and buy a load of whiskey that you're not sure if you're going to like or not, and a lot of them seemed a little cynical to me. A couple of them at least are just straight up replicas of already current whiskies, and a little price bump on them. So I thought I was a bit upset about that. But I didn't pick these up first time round, as you might have guessed. I'm probably like a year or so, maybe even more than that, late on these. But I waited until they were on a good price deal. In my case, it was on Amazon, but I know that there's deals all over the world with these things right now. People are just trying to shift the stock of it, to be honest. So I picked up the four that I thought I might like. And in that case, it's the Talisker, the Clynelish, the Lagavulin, and now the Oban. Now, this one here is a little bit different, as you might have noticed. The other ones tend to have a bit of parity across the range, apart from the Mortlach, which is in a nice kind of gold tin. Won't be getting that, because even on deal price, it's still quite expensive. So that's a bit away from me. I don't typically get on with the Mortlach flavour, I have to admit as well, but that's a story for another day if I ever do review one of their bottles. This one's a little bit different, because the other ones are based on the Seven Kingdoms. This one is like the Night's Watch. So it's like, black crows, all that kind of gubbins. I have to say before we get into it as well, although, it looks lovely, the tube is nice, I don't really get into the kind of marketing side of things, but it's just another whiskey where I can't see through the bottle. This one's got a kind of like a plasticky kind of facade thing to it. I don't know if you can hear that, but yeah, it's got this kind of plasticky thing over it, which is kind of solid black. It does have, it's like a smoky black bottle, so you would be able to see through that if it weren't for this label. But it's a really nitpicky thing, I know, but it kind of irks me. I have a touch of OCD sometimes. It irks me a little when I can't see how much liquid I've got left. You can have a kind of, a little guess on that, but I want to know if it's getting down too low so I can either bottle kill it or, not hit it so hard if I really like it, that kind of thing. But even up to the light, you got nada. You got nada. Just a nitpicky thing, but that won't bother me too much. This thing is going to go down pretty quickly. I'm probably going to share it around a little. As you get from the actual tasting when I get into it, it's not like, overly special, worth keeping, that sort of thing. Not that any of them are, to be honest. Just my opinion. So, this one here is £65 up front. I paid about 40 for it, which puts it into the same price bracket as the Oban 14. Obviously, £65 is significantly more expensive than the Oban 14, and we'll get into that a little bit later on when we talk about the value of the whiskey. It's a 43%er, which isn't too bad, it's better than 40 for sure, and it's actually kind of parity with the rest of the Oban core range. Obviously, some of them get released a little higher, but typically speaking, like the Oban 14's a 43, and the Oban Little Bay, which, funnily enough, is one of those things where it means the same thing as Oban means Little Bay. Bit of Irish voice, so they're actually saying Little Bay, Little Bay. So it's a lot more expensive than the other things that you can get, but we'll get into that. Let's get into the actual tasting itself and see what we've got in the glass, if it's worth kind of your interest. These things are going to be sold out pretty soon, I think, once the kind of final stock is shifted. So, yeah, you can decide for yourself whether there's something you might pick up. Let's have a look in the old No Nonsense whiskey glass and see what we've got. Of course, it's a added colour, so, we won't get into that too much. All of the range kind of looks the same across the it. That's the whole point of the Diageo thing. Let's have a look on the nose then. Now, one of the things that struck me about this when I was doing my research on this, when I was sitting down doing my kind of tasting notes, is how much it changed throughout the kind of glass. So this is one of those ones I usually recommend, you leave your whiskey sitting on the side for a time. But this one, if you do have a bottle of this, what I would like you to try and do is pour the whiskey straight out and smell it straight away, and then smell it in a few minutes, and then a few minutes more. Because I find this kind of like, it kind of changes a little bit while it's sitting in the glass. It might just be me, you might have got the same thing, but let's get into it. And the first thing that you would get, I think, is quite a vegetal, kind of herbal notes on it. We're talking a kind of grassiness there. Not bad at all. It's kind of, not a kind of damp kind of smell, but definitely a kind of understated of that kind of grassiness, like I said. Then, as it develops, a kind of sweetness comes out of it, a little kind of biscuity thing, a kind of buttery, biscuity kind of vibe about it. We're talking like a bottom of like a cheesecake or something like that. And then finally, out of nowhere, this kind of fruitiness comes out. And I have to say, all of this is quite understated. It's not It's not in your face at all. It's a very calm and subtle whiskey. So you have to kind of dig deep for these things, but they are there, in my nose anyway. Let's get onto the palate and see what we've got. Okay, so it's another interesting one. It's not quite as interesting as the nose, I don't think, but there is a dynamic to it on the back end, which does make it kind of interesting. The first thing that you get out of this is spiciness, this kind of pepperiness that comes out of nowhere. It starts out quite thin, I have to say, and then the pepperiness comes out. But one of the really interesting things about this one is that the back end turns into like, and this is a tasting note I don't give very often, but it's like almost like hedgerow fruits, you know, like raspberries and kind of blackberries, that kind of thing. It's not like heavy on these things. It's really light and subtle, just like the nose, but it's definitely there. And there's not many whiskies I've tried that manage that. Let's have another sip. Yeah, the finish is, you know, it's fairly long, but it's mostly the spice that's kind of sticking around. So I have to say, not a bad whiskey at all. Something that I'm probably going to enjoy. We're talking about value now. Obviously, this is one of the things I like to do, talk about value rather than price. £65 is expensive, but we're not talking about that. Is it worth that sort of money? And I have to say, if the Oban 14 didn't exist, then maybe yes. But when the Oban 14 is just knocking around, I covered that many years ago now on probably a terrible video, so do go and check that out, but you know, don't judge me too harshly on my old setups. And I have to say, I would not buy this again should it be available over the Oban 14, which is just a nice stable whiskey that is just really tasty, a good old friend, let's say. I did buy this over the 14 at the same sort of price, but I'm a Game of Thrones fan, I'm a whiskey fan, you know, I like Oban in general, and also, you know, of course I have the whiskey channel, so I'm always interested in buying new things when they become available to me, especially if I've already covered them. Like I've already covered the Oban 14, so it didn't really make much sense to buy that again today, but that's just me. If you're looking at this and looking at buying it, you know, think about some of the things that I've just said there. So, you know, if you've tried the Oban 14, you know you like it, and you're looking for something different but sort of similar, then yeah, get it. If you're interested in Game of Thrones, then yeah, get it. I wouldn't recommend paying the full price for it. Wait for it to come onto deal. You know, we're a stone's throw from Black Friday. That's tomorrow. If you're watching this as it just comes out, it's probably going to be in that while Amazon tries to get rid of its last little bits of stock. Places like Master and Malt are out of stock now. So this isn't going to be around forever, but, you know, don't go crazy on the secondary market. It probably isn't worth that. It's just a kind of generally nice tasting whiskey. Out of the 4 that I've tried so far, this is 100% fourth place. Those first 3, the Talisker, the Kleinlich and the Lagavulin, they're very different flavour profiles between the 3 of them, and I have to say that they would change the top spot for me regularly, depending on my mood. If I'm into peat, then obviously Lagavulin's going to be up there. If I'm into my peat but not quite, I want to take a step back from that, the Talisker's going to be the number 1. And if I don't want peat at all, then the Kleinlich is going to hit the number 1 spot. So they're all interchangeable, apart from this one. This one hits the 4th place for me. And I'm pretty sure some of the other ones would be, you know, in that kind of bracket, you know, interchangeable, but I'm not going to buy those ones. Let me know what you think about this if you've got it. If you haven't got it, if I've convinced you to buy it or just to leave it alone, let me know in the old comments below. And hopefully I've either swayed you yes or no, one way or the other.